planetary effects. Whether that's drifting sand and dust in the deserts, blizzards in the frozen tundra, or rainfall in the wetlands, using the various surface types covering star citizens, planets, and moons to create particle effects that can enhance the look and feel of a location has been a goal of the project for some time. That's why in this week's show, we met with members of the VFX team to discuss this important milestone on the journey towards dynamic planet-wide weather, and what backers can expect to experience to some degree on all planets and moons in the upcoming Alpha 3.8.
These planet effects is something I'm really passionate about, not least because even though it's like a big effort for the VFX team and it kind of brings us all together and we have to coordinate really well, it also brings us together with the other teams as well. So obviously without the environment art team, we wouldn't be able to generate ground effects. So we have to work really closely with those teams. Audio as well, like you can't really have like intense weather effects or storm effects without the good audio that kind of really makes it feel like you're in a storm. That's always been the appealing thing of working in games anyway. It's working with multiple teams and all kind of coming together and just being able to release this product that is really kind of incredible.
So we were programmers, artists, QA, all in the same team. So we have a lot of back and forth, especially with these things. It's a process to get to these results.
The important thing to bear in mind is that a lot of people see this as weather, but whilst weather is a big part of that, the actual work that we were doing was planet effects. So one of the drivers of the effects, when we talk about rule sets, one of the main things that we did there was wind. The surface type kind of designates what is that effect going to be. So is it sand, is it snow? And then it's the wind that's actually going to push those things around. So when you've got the combination of wind and surface types together, that gives us the ground storms and the things that really kind of make it look very dynamic and spectacular.
Surface type we use to mark up our planet terrain basically. We have a list of surface types that the planet can be, whether that's snow, sand, soil, rock, metal, and then that effectively takes up the top of our hierarchy for the planet effects, where we can tie a whole library of effects to one surface type. And then with programming wizardry we can basically say, okay, well this whole area here is made of snow, let's try and spawn all these snow effects in the library. One of the most important things that we had to do for this was some system for level of detail. When you're up in space, it's going to look different to when you're inside it. Plus, we don't want to be spawning the same effects because it's going to be expensive and we don't want to melt people's graphics cards. So from far away, we can define a different effect that's maybe a bit cheaper, looks a bit different, and behaves differently. So we can have up to 8 levels of detail. And the closer you get, it'll switch out which level of detail is currently being spawned. So until you get all the way in, and then that's when a special LOD, which is the fog LOD, starts spawning, which is the one that's immediately around you. But we can fill it up with the fog LOD, which is volumetric fog that we can change the colour of, noise, density, whatever else. And it gives it a bit more of a full feeling to it, where you had loads of big sort of blowing snow particles going past the camera.
So we already had a whole suite of particle effects visible on a planet's surface, but on its own it doesn't really sell the idea that you are inside of that storm or inside of that rain cloud. That's why it was very crucial to add another layer of that realism, where when you are flying through a snowstorm, you would see actual tiny molten pieces of snow on the visor, or if you are outside of your vehicle, it would be it would be canopy on a spaceship, but the visor on your helmet if you are outside. And that actually binds these two elements together, where you see all these storm effects outside, and then you actually see that affecting you as a player, because it sits literally on your visor. It affects your vision essentially, which is non-directly affecting the gameplay as well, because it's not a statistic where the visibility is reduced, it's actually you having problems seeing objects. So I think that's a really nice way of using visuals to drive the gameplay, but also making you feel as if the temperature was low, it was actually you there in the winter.
So what's the difference between planetary effects and weather? Well, really there is no difference in terms of the effects themselves. It's basically building a system for planetary effects that will feed into weather when we do get dynamic weather further down the line. The V4 tech really enabled us to do a lot of that stuff that we couldn't previously do with Planetary V3. The things that drive the effects are really the important part of this process, and one of those drivers will be weather. So what we've actually got in 3.8 is we have surface types and we have the wind.
So we have this global wind map. This is right now the best way for us to control where there will be wind and where there won't be wind, and to change wind dynamically. This is a texture wrapped around the planet, and it defines the wind direction and the wind speed. With this wind map, it's quite easy to change for artists to say, like, we want to have like strong winds in a certain position, but we can also rotate this wind map, and that's what we used in CitizenCom to make the storm appear. For 3.8, we will also have these rotating wind maps to create some kind of dynamic weather on most of the planets.
Even with all the kind of planning in the world, there's always going to be things that you realise as you're making things. So to be honest, as a process, it's been really interesting. There's been lots of new ideas that we've had as we've been implementing existing ideas. It might have been, there's several examples where we've kind of thought of better ways to do it. There was new optimizations that came in that we hadn't really thought about previously, but became very obvious as we started to see the effects covering planets and from out in space and things like that.
When using particle system to spawn this high number of particles, in order to do that, we need to implement a number of optimization techniques. One thing we had to do was implement a technique called Horus, and the way it works is you only render to a fraction of full resolution. Obviously reduces the quality, and in order to combat that, we have implemented some custom filters that we apply when we scale up. And this results in hardly any visual difference, but considerate boost in performance.
So pre-age particles are a new feature that we're implementing right now. It's going to go in the immediate future. Right now, when we move a certain distance away from where we were 10 seconds ago, those particles could still exist, which is expensive. So instead what we're going to do is you move away, those particles get deleted because you don't see them anymore, and now we're going to spawn particles that have already aged a bit and give the impression that they already existed, rather than them being born and aging from scratch, which should give the impression that the planet is constantly spawning these effects and they existed even though they weren't in your render distance.
So the work that we've done on planetary effects through the year, really, even from the very start of the year, it's been a really long road. We've put everything into it really as a team. We've been really focused. We had the kind of high level goals right from the start and we've stuck to them. We've been really true to what we wanted to achieve. It's been a kind of long journey, I guess, but we're really excited to see the results in 3.8.
Spaceships. For all the various aspects that make up the Star Citizen universe, things always seem to come back to your spaceship. For some, a ship can serve as a home away from home. For others, simply a means to an end. For others still, maybe just a way to show off to your friends and enemies. Of Star Citizen's 160 plus spaceships and vehicles, it's pretty easy to find a ship and reason that's right for you. And the folks at Crusader Industries have a new offering that they think you're going to be interested in. That's why we sat down with John Crew and Paul Jones to find out more about the recently announced Ares Starfighter.
So the Ares Starfighter is another heavy fighter that fits in our universe to complement the Vanguard and the F-8.
So this was going to be a relatively small craft, but with a massive punch. And that, in a nutshell, is what we were given.
The Ares, with its size 7 gun, is great for tackling large and capital ships and heavily armoured ground targets. It's the Star Citizen equivalent of the A-10 Warthog. It also has a big complement of size 3 missiles held in both external missile pods or missile racks that can be customised, and then it also has some internal bespoke racks that keep it all internally inside the body and just feeds them out in a big magazine-style launcher.
We did quite a lot of variations with guns in different places in the centre, on the side. We even looked at going to an S6, which is only a drop of one number, but in terms of meters, it's quite big. And then when you went to an S6, the ship then It looked more like a ship with a gun attached rather than a gun with a ship attached.
So we have two variants for the Starfighter, one more energy focused, one ballistic focused. They are full hull variants, they're not just sort of named variants. The energy one, the Ion, has an energy cannon by default, but it also has an additional power plant, shield and cooler to power that, because it is essentially a capital sized weapon on a medium ship, so it's well outside the normal parameters for a ship. So that is quite a difference to the Inferno ballistic version, which has a ballistic repeater sort of Gatling gun on it. That doesn't need the extra power plant and cooler to function, so it trades that out for extra ammo capacity. It has much heavier armor, which the Ion doesn't have, because it needs those extra components to function, so it can't deal with the extra weight of armor on top. So you have one ship with two different play styles within the single gun ship range.
So what did we learn this week? We learned that the biggest and baddest of features can often take the collective efforts of teams and disciplines across the world. That planetary effects are the first major milestone on the road to full-scale dynamic global weather making its way to Star Citizen. And that Crusader spaceships aren't just intended to excel in their given task. They clearly want you to look cool as all heck doing it. For Inside Star Citizen, I'm Jared Huckabee, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for watching. For the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42, you can subscribe to our channel, or you can check out some of the other shows, and you can also head to our website at www.robertspaceindustries.com. Thank you very much for watching.